Back at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on a Wednesday night, the familiar thump of the Monarch machine behind us as Marvin Harrison Jr. and his cohorts get in their usual late-night work here on a game week. Ohio State playing Michigan State on Saturday, but obviously the other team in Michigan is a big topic of conversation, both in terms of the game Ohio State's going to play there in a couple weeks and all the other nonsense that's going on with Michigan. And tonight, for the first time, Ryan Day broke his silence of sorts on a piece of the sign-stealing, in-person scouting scandal. Michigan reportedly sort of fired back and gave the Big Ten documents saying that it proves or alleges Ohio State and Rutgers shared signals with Purdue before the 2022 Big Ten Championship game. So I gave Ryan Day a chance to respond to that, and this was his exact quote. I'm not going to get into all that right now, which is often how he usually starts these, but he didn't stop there tonight. But I can tell you this right now, that nobody here did any of that. We went through and made sure. We went and asked all the questions and got our compliance people involved, and none of that came back at all. So I can answer you very strongly, that did not happen. I tried to clarify with him when he said that they asked questions, was that asked questions last year before they shared information or asked questions in the past 48 hours about whether any of this went on, and he was like, I'm not answering more questions. So, crux of this is, at a time when it seemed like this was something that was going to be a big problem for Michigan, is there a way that it's a big problem for Ohio State in terms of a distraction, in terms of a team that loses focus, in terms of a coaching staff that loses focus, because it has to look into these things and do these sorts of things at a time when the season is coming down to a real crunch point? Like, Steven, how does Ryan Day get his team to not worry about that when we have talked so much about how you need to be loose and ready to go when you get up to Ann Arbor in a couple weeks?
I don't think they are worried about it. I think today was part of the reason he answered it, because this was a fact thing. This was something he could say yes or no, this happened.
And it was an allegation about Ohio State. It wasn't about some other program maybe doing something.
Right. So this is him fact-checking information about his program. He didn't answer the family stuff on Tuesday. He didn't even want to go down that road, even when it was jokingly thrown his way about, boxing and all this other stuff. Anything else he has shut down. I don't think they're worried about it. He even went into detail of when crazy things happen, basically, especially with that program right now. But in general, it's like Quinn Temple knows about it, who's his chief of staff. And if you guys watch on TV, he's also the get-back guy. So Quinn Temple, holdback guy of many roles here. But if it's something that needs their attention, or if Gene Smith, who he did bring up Gene Smith's name, if they come to him with something, that's the only way he knows about it. Other than that, he's focused on football. So I don't think he has to do anything extra to make sure that none of the people, they're aware of it. Everybody knows what's going on here. But it doesn't seem like it's actually a distraction right now.
Yeah, I think he probably pays more attention to it than that. I don't think Gene Smith has to come in and tell him when somebody reports something, because I think there's probably reporters reaching out to him throughout this process. Let's not be naive. If they're not reaching out to him, they're reaching out to other people on this staff, and it's getting to him probably sooner than that. So I don't think any of this stuff has necessarily caught him by surprise. But, as it relates to the Ohio State task at hand, I think the phrase he used was, they're worried about, they're focusing on the game, and anything else would be a waste of our time. And I think this is just one of the challenges that comes up for teams throughout a season. Some kind of something happens that could be a distraction. Frankly, last year for Michigan, it was the whole thing with the tunnel and Michigan State and that whole thing that ensued there, and that could have been something that knocked them off course. Instead, they go undefeated and win the Big Ten Championship and go to the playoff again. So this seems to be just one of those things that a coach has to fight his way through, right, Andrew?
I think so, and I think you just tell the team, guys, we'll handle this. You don't have to worry about any of this. We'll handle this. JT Tuimoloau was asked, got a tongue-tied there. He was asked earlier about the Michigan stuff, like, hey, are you paying attention to any of that stuff? He's like, we got to worry about Michigan State. That's all we're really focused on right now. And it wasn't what he said, because you can kind of expect that. He said, look, we're not really worried about any of that. It just kind of came off as like, I get it, I understand, but we're not really focused on that. And I do get it, because we have talked for everything else this week, like, hey, you've got 2 weeks, and then you've got to be full. The Death Star has got to be operational in 2 weeks. The offensive line has got to get better. Kyle McCord has got to get better. The defense has got to continue to do this. You've got to keep doing all of these different things as you get closer to the Michigan game. You don't have to worry about, hey, did Michigan know our signs, or what's going on? Am I interested to see if Jim Harbaugh is going to get suspended? You don't have to worry about that right now, because if there is, and I would be surprised, we can talk about this when we get to the Michigan game, that, I'd be surprised if anybody's going to admit to this, but if there's going to be a change of signals or any of that stuff, the coaches will handle it. The coaches will handle it, and I think that this is just something that the coaches are going to have to keep separate from the team. Yeah, it can be a distraction, but if you do a good enough job, I think you can just kind of no comment your way to death and kind of just keep going through this. So I see this is obviously a distraction. This is obviously something that's a huge deal, but I don't think it's something that you can allow to kind of just overtake things. And I think that's what Ohio State's trying to do, and I think they're doing a fairly decent job of it.
I think Ohio State fans would rather be the Rebels than the Death Star. Spoiler alert, things don't end well for the Death Star.
I still haven't seen them. No, I'm just kidding.
I think they'd rather be Luke Skywalker than Darth Vader in this situation, but I get what you're saying, and I think you're right, and that's what this all comes down to. The Big Ten, we're recording this on Wednesday night. Supposedly Michigan submitted its response to the Big Ten today. The Big Ten is going to consider that. I'm becoming more skeptical by the day that anything significant happens. I mean, maybe there would be a suspension for Jim Harbaugh. I don't know. This concept that, I think when this first came out, people wildly speculated, man, is this going to be the death penalty for Michigan? And Ohio State's going to have to go up there and win that game head to head against a really great team. I don't know what to tell you. That's the only way this is going to resolve. So it's one of those unfortunate distractions that comes for a team, assuming Ohio State had, no extracurriculars that added to any of this in any way, as Ryan Day's asserting that they didn't. But it's just part of it. And you've got to find a way to focus through that. And the only way that this is going to resolve in any kind of a satisfying way for Ohio State is if they win in Ann Arbor on November 25th. So that's what they'll be trying to do for the next couple of weeks, getting ready for that game. Get the text, 614-350-3315, because anything else that we hear involving Ohio State and this topic will be coming to you there first, and we'll be talking about it on Buckeye Talk. Get that wherever you can find podcasts.